November 13th, 2005 is a day that will live in infamy in the professional wrestling world. 20 years ago to this day, Eddie Guerrero passed away. Eddie Guerrero, to me, is one of, if not the greatest professional wrestlers in the business today. He's on my Mount Rushmore. If you want to know, my Mount Rushmore: Eddie Guerrero, Chris Jericho, The Undertaker, and Bret Hart. Those, and the Mount Rushmore always changes. And if you want to add a fifth guy onto the Mount Rushmore for me, I'm always going to add the man they call Sting to that list. But those are the four names that I loved. I was a young kid when Eddie Guerrero passed. I only got to see like the prime of his career, but it's the one death that is the most devastating because he was one of the greatest to ever do it. Not only in the ring, but out of the ring too, as well, with his promos, his characters, him lying, cheating, and stealing. Like, that gimmick was awesome. And his legacy lives on to this very day with not only that type of gimmick, the comedy stuff he did, what he did in the ring. Eddie Guerrero was amazing. And since today is the 20-year anniversary of the professional wrestling world losing Eddie Guerrero, I wanted to dedicate episode 6 of the Pro Wrestling with Wisdom show to remembering Eddie Guerrero, going through his early career to 2005, to what happened afterwards, some of the what ifs, and that's what I'm going to do. So sit back, relax, and let's talk about Eddie Guerrero here. So Eddie Guerrero, he was a part of the Guerrero family. I mean, there's so many notable names that have wrestled. Gory Guerrero, who created a lot of notable moves at that time. Chavo Guerrero, who's their senior and junior. Fun fact, Eddie Guerrero's brother, Chavo Guerrero Sr., was the gobbledygooker in that. He was basically in the mascot for Survivor Series, when the egg popped out and out came the gobbledygooker. That was Eddie Guerrero's brother in there. I mean, you also have Hector Guerrero, Mando Guerrero. I mean, even Eddie Guerrero's daughter's Shaw was in the business a little bit. And Sherilyn recently, I think, just debuted. Another fascinating fact, Aiden English of AEW, Matthew Renwell, like he basically married Shaw Guerrero, so he is a part of the Guerrero family. He's currently in Impact Wrestling right now, doing color commentating. He actually would replace D'Lo Brown at the time. He actually retired to focus. He'd rather retire to focus as a commentator. But, the Guerrero family has a lot of very notable names. But out of the bunch, Eddie is the one that really stood out between the group. I mean, Gory Guerrero, to me, created more moves, but Eddie Guerrero was the one that stood out the most. And I loved Chavo Guerrero, and I really wish that WWE did more to book him better, but it was clear Eddie Guerrero was the number one guy in the business. So Eddie Guerrero was raised in El Paso, Texas. He was dedicated to the business. He wanted to follow in his own footsteps. And he actually once he actually graduated high school in 85, he actually started to debut and wrestle a little bit in 86. I remembered at the time he was a jobber in WCW. One of the more notable matches was when Terry Funk was there. He had one of his first few matches with Terry Funk. And, there'd be a few times he would be on and off learning the business. But I really think he started to get popular and start to get into the mainstream with his experience in AAA. Now, AAA, of course, is now owned by WWE, but they were one of the big promotions in Mexico. And what really got Eddie Guerrero to be known more was his tag team, the Los Gringos Locos, which, by the way, his tag team partner was Art Barr. And Art Barr is also one of the more underrated professional wrestlers at the time as well. He's also one of the greater what-if stories in professional wrestling because he would die at the age of 28 in 1994 due to a drug overdose. There's plenty of stories I could go into Art Barr, but that'll be a separate video here. But him and Eddie Guerrero were a tag team, and they were really good in Triple. I remembered watching those early to mid 90s AAA shows, and I would see Eddie Guerrero and Art Barr in these tag matches, and they were amazing. I mean, fascinating fact too as well, because Eddie Guerrero and Art Barr were super close. Eddie Guerrero started doing the frog splash in tribute to Art Barr, and I remembered watching Art Barr doing these frog splashes, and those frog splashes were really, really good. Arguably one of the best frog splashes of all time was by Art Barr. And I remember there was a story of why it was called the frog splash. You could actually thank Too Cold Scorpio, who saw Art Barr do the frog splash move, and it was him who basically said that Barr looked like a frog every time he would do that move. And when Barr heard that, he decided that he was going to call it the frog splash. And of course, Eddie Guerrero would adopt the move later on. And with Art Barr, he would actually pass away in '94 due to a heart failure, mainly due to drug abuse. I mean, Art Barr was all messed up on drugs. And I mean, there's other stories as well. I'll go into it in a future video. But him and Eddie had really good matches together. And the one that really stood out was the hair versus mask match at one of the When Worlds Collide shows, when I think it was in the match they faced with El Hijo del Santo and Octagon. They were really good at that time. And it's not just AAA where Guerrero was good in. He also wrestled in New Japan. And in New Japan, he would form a very close relationship with Chris Benoit that would last throughout their entire throughout Eddie's life. I mean, Eddie Guerrero was basically Chris Benoit's guider. He would guide him through all of his issues. They were best friends. We'll get to those two in a second. But Eddie Guerrero would wrestle as well in New Japan. He was Black Tiger. And the matches he would have in New Japan, they were hard, but they were damn good. And he would also have time as well in ECW as well. But he really started to go on his singles run once Art Barr would pass, and he would join Japan and ECW. There was actually at one point where Paul Heyman approached him about wrestling in '95 as a tag team, but because of Art Barr dying, he basically would join as a singles. And there were a few matches that were great. I actually loved his ECW matches with Dean Malenko. I mean, they always get credit in WCW, but him and Dean Malenko would always have great matches. So in mid '95, he would actually join WCW at the time. He was a notable wrestler in the cruiserweight division. Well, like a lot of people with when they think of WCW, they think of the NWO stuff, which, to be honest, the NWO made and break WCW. But to me, the cruiserweights were the thing that really helped draw WCW. The amazing matches that were going on there they're legendary. And I remembered at the time as well, Guerrero would actually represent WCW in a lot of, because WCW and New Japan worked together with each other. He would always do those shows. He would even have championship runs throughout 96 to 97. He would even be a part of the LWO faction. And, this is when he and it's just a lot of notable members of WCW. I mean, Eddie Guerrero, Hector Garza, Damien, Rey Mysterio, Juventud Guerrero, Silver King, Psychosis, La Parca, El Dandy. I mean, there were a lot of notable names at that time that were a part of this faction. Eddie Guerrero was the leader of the faction, and the LWO is still being featured. The LWO isn't as great as it once was, but the LWO is still factored today. They returned in 2023. And this was at a time where Ray was the leader, Joaquin Wilde, Cruz del Toro, Dragon Lee even eventually joined in 2024. Santos Escobar, Carlitos, Zelina Vega was a part of the faction, but the LWO was such a popular thing that they brought it back, and I felt like it was a good faction. Basically a play off the New World Order. And of course, he would eventually leave the company in 2000. It was actually him, Chris Benoit, Dean Malenko, and Perry Saturn. They all left WCW in 2002 to join the WWF. And this was at a time when Kevin Sullivan and Mike Graham and Eddie Graham were Eddie Graham were basically a part of. There was a story one time where Eddie Graham would basically threaten Chris Benoit and Guerrero, and they all threatened to leave the company and sue unless they would leave. And eventually WCW didn't want to be involved with a legal battle, so they received release from all four, and they all immediately joined WWE in 2000 as the Radicals. And it was one of the more notable debuts from WCW to WWE, because they got all four talents: Benoit, Malenko, Guerrero, and Perry Saturn. And to be honest with you, Perry Saturn, he's another one that's had a crazy story as well. Dean Malenko, it just never worked out for him in WWE. I mean, he had some notable moments in WWE, but injuries was a reason why it just didn't work out with him there, and he chose to retire in 2001. Benoit, that was a tragedy, and Guerrero had his own issues. But I think the thing that I remember the most with him in 2000s, like in his first tenure with WWE, was the partnership between him and Chyna. Basically, Eddie Guerrero calling him basically his mamacita. And it was a pairing that worked out very, very well. And I'll tell you, there were some notable matches that happened there, moments. Like, I remember at the time when Chyna was angry that Eddie pinned her in the King of the Ring tournament. He basically gifted he gifted Eddie Guerrero a puppy at the time, and it was just adorable. It's just their faction, their group together just was really, it worked out well. And Eddie Guerrero would even win the Intercontinental Championship at the time, and he would turn heel. But the thing with Eddie Guerrero during his first time, he would have a lot of injuries, and he was so messed up on pills. And to be honest, at that early time, he got released. This wasn't mentioned in a lot of the documentaries everyone made about Guerrero, but he got released because of multiple DUIs, and because he showed up messed up at work. They had to let him go because his drug issues were going after. I mean, Eddie Guerrero, there's been plenty of stories about Eddie Guerrero driving under the influence and being arrested for it. He would show up to shows all messed up on pills. He was a wreck. He was a wreck with all the pills he took, and with all the injuries as well. I mean, I remembered he had like an elbow injury, so many injuries that he had, and you could take as many bumps as you do until like the pain gets doled out with the painkillers. I mean, let's be real. Eddie Guerrero was absolutely on steroids too. I mean, look at Eddie Guerrero with how his size was. He pretty much had to be on steroids to stand out. Him and Benoit were on steroids, and it's scary to see them. And of course, he got released with the drunk driving, and it had to be done. It really had to be done for it's just depressing. And he would go on to be in the independent circuit for the time being, but he worked his way back. He got himself sober. He took care of himself. He was in such a bad point. This was revealed by Vicky Guerrero in the Chris Benoit Dark Side of the Ring episodes, that Eddie Guerrero actually overdosed at their house 3 times. The first 2 times she basically called the ambulance to, get him out of it. The last time she basically just left him there, took the kids away, allowed him to pass the OD away because she was so sick of all the drug issues and all that he was having. And he's like, if God's going to take him now. To be honest, Vicky Guerrero doesn't really come off as a class A type woman. I mean, I get the drug overdose thing that bothered me, but her comments as well with her daughter not too long ago, recently, how Sherilyn was basically coming out with allegations of abuse with Vicky's current fiance, and Vicky basically went after Sherilyn, basically calling her in the wrong and basically disowning her. It's a messy situation. But with all the drug issues that happened with Eddie Guerrero at the time and overdosing, she just had enough. And Eddie looked himself in the mirror. He got himself cleaned up. And eventually, he returned to WWE in 2002. And, he would have hit the closer relationship with Chris Benoit. Los Guerreros became big as well, where he and his nephew Chavo Guerrero, they were lying, cheating, and stealing. And there were so many crazy... I remembered one vignette that they were doing where Eddie Guerrero and Chavo Guerrero were out golfing and they were lying as well. I remembered one time they were doing the card and he marked it wrong. And I remembered that Eddie was trying to hit the golf ball. He just kept missing. And at one point he was just throwing the golf ball closer to the hole. He would kick away the balls. And once Eddie and Chavo won the golfing match, he basically got all the money that they were facing golfing wise, got hustling, taking their watch. It was crazy. I mean, so many funny moments with Eddie Guerrero and Chavo. I mean, they even won the tag team championships with each other. And I gotta tell you, another moment I loved with Eddie Guerrero was during the Royal Rumble. Eddie Guerrero would basically steal Ric Flair's number. Ric Flair at that time would hold the number 30 entrant, and Eddie Guerrero was number 1. And at the entire time, he basically... I always laughed watching this. This is one of my favorite parts about Eddie. He always made you laugh with what he did in the ring. And Eddie Guerrero stole Ric Flair's number. And when Teddy Long confronted Eddie about it, he's like, give Rick his number. He basically did. And Teddy basically was like, give it up, brother. And then eventually Eddie gives Teddy Long a wallet, and it was Ric Flair's wallet. He basically stole Ric Flair's number and his wallet. It's so funny. I mean, there's so many memorable moments with Eddie Guerrero. I mean, I remembered this was during a time when him and Batista were eventually going to be feuding with each other, and Eddie couldn't compete in the ring, and he was like having stomach issues, and I don't know why when they were sticking the thermometer in the segment, Eddie Guerrero had the funniest reaction to the thermometer going out there. Like, if I could find the video and link it, I would. It's so funny. And just the way he would cheat and steal and like go through matches. I remembered one time when Eddie, the ref, was knocked out. Eddie had the title in the ring, and the referee was coming up. He handed the title to Rey Mysterio. Rey just gave the title to Eddie Guerrero, and Eddie Guerrero was hiding the title, and the ref's like, what are you doing? Do you have the title back? He's like, no. And then when he got... Eddie was so fun. I swear, Eddie Guerrero was so alive. He would be perfect for a comedy movie. Like, all the segments he was doing, it was wonderful. And he was great in the ring. He had so many fun matches. Oh my! I remember when he won the WWE Championship against Brock Lesnar. A big reason why, because Brock Lesnar wanted out at that time, and his contract was up after WrestleMania 20, and they had to find a way to get the title off of Brock, because Brock was going to face Goldberg at that, and Brock versus Goldberg at Mania 20 was awful. So what they had was that No Way Out. Eddie Guerrero faced Brock Lesnar for the WWE Championship, and he eventually defeated Brock and became the champion. It was such a wonderful match, and he became a triple crown and Grand Slam champion. And one of my favorite parts about Eddie winning the championship and how beloved he was the crowd reaction. They loved this man, and he loved them back. And one of I gotta say as well with Eddie, he always could show it in the ring. He was beloved by fans, and he was such an entertainer. He really was a wonderful entertainer. And he would eventually have a WrestleMania match with Kurt Angle, and that match was great too. And I love how to get out of the ankle lock spot, he basically took his boot out and then pinned Kurt in the ring. It was great. And the thing about WrestleMania 20, it's often forgotten about because of what Chris Benoit did, and rightfully so. Eddie Guerrero, after Chris Benoit wins the World Heavyweight Championship against Shawn Michaels and Triple H, Eddie Guerrero would come in. Both these two guys were champions, best friends. They loved each other. They fought through the dojo in Japan, the hard style that they were wrestling, and to finally be champions together at that moment was just wonderful. And David Benoit, the son of Chris Benoit on the Dark Side of the Ring episode, said it best. Like, he wished that both would retire just then. And to be honest, I mean, it's hindsight looking back, but even though we would have lost a lot of good matches from the both of them, it's hard not to see why. They peaked in that moment. And who knows if they both retired and became producers or trainees. Who knows what would have happened. But Eddie decided to stick around, and so did Chris. They wanted to continue wrestling. And Eddie Guerrero would eventually lose the championship to JBL. God, there was this one match that they both had, and it's insane, where Eddie Guerrero and JBL, they had one of, if not the bloodiest matches I have ever seen. And I remembered at the time, this was in 2004 Judgment Day, JBL would hit Eddie Guerrero in the head with a chair. It was a nasty chair shot, and Eddie Guerrero would sell it because he would eventually have to blade himself. Eddie Guerrero, while blading himself, cut like a vein, and he was gushing, and I mean gushing blood. It was so scary to see. It was so scary, and the amount of blood that was all over the ring, that was all over the place. It was scary. It really was scary to see that match happen and all the blood that dropped. And I really don't know how Eddie A, finished the match, and B, I don't even know how Eddie didn't die because of all the blood that was all over the place. I mean, JBL was also bloody, but I mean, Eddie cut himself so deep. It was scary to see that match. And, Eddie would eventually lose the title to JBL. And, Eddie was basically, he would have a bunch of storylines, he would turn heel with Rey Mysterio, and that's where they feuded over Dominic. And I remember that one of the SummerSlams, Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio fought for the custody of Dominic, and it's not still a match stipulation that isn't looked upon the best way. It's a great match, but the stipulation for the custody of Dominic is I don't know about that. But one of the more memorable moments in that match was Eddie Guerrero was climbing to grab the briefcase, and at one point there was a spot where Eddie Guerrero was so angry, banging his hands on the mat, where the heck was Vicky? Because Vicky Guerrero missed a spot where she was going to run in, tilt the ladder over to do the right thing to have Rey Mysterio win and retain the custody of Dominic. And oh my God, it was it was insane. Like they had a really, really good feel. Like Eddie Guerrero was a good heel at the time. I mean, I still think he was a better face, but Eddie Guerrero as a heel was super, super underrated. Like go watch his heel promos. They were great. And once that feud ended, it was clear that Guerrero was going to go after the World Heavyweight Championship, and he would have the feud with Batista. And it was eventually going to be Eddie Guerrero versus Batista. There's no doubt in my mind that the plan was for those two to have a match with each other. And, Batista would defeat Eddie Guerrero at No Mercy. But I still believe that if Eddie was still alive, he would have had that another world title run. And his last match was against Mr. Kennedy in SmackDown. They were going to do a Survivor Series qualifying match, and God, it's crazy to reflect on this. Like in his last match, Eddie Guerrero would pull one of his lie, cheat, and stealing moves where he got a chair while the ref was knocked out, and he was going to hit the chair on the floor, and he basically threw the chair to Mr. Kennedy while the ref was up. The ref thought he hit Eddie Guerrero with the chair. And Eddie Guerrero basically won via disqualification. He basically lied, cheated his way just to get that Survivor Series match. It's crazy that that's the last match that Eddie Guerrero ever done. And that's a spot that's commonly used in professional wrestling. I mean, we just saw it with John Cena versus Dirty Dominic Mysterio on Monday Night Raw, which, by the way, I told everyone so that John Cena was going to win the Intercontinental Championship on his final run. He pretty much had to. But Dominic was going to do the Eddie Guerrero spot, and John knew about it, handed the chair off to Dominic, and fell down to the floor to make sure he wasn't disqualified for it. And it's always seen everywhere. And it's crazy that that's the last match that he had. And eventually he was going to have the world title match. And apparently, like Stephanie McMahon would claim that he was supposed to win the World Heavyweight Championship to start his second reign. It was also rumored that Batista was going to take time to heal from his back injury at the time. Even though it was later denied by Batista, there was rumors like Batista was going to lose the belt to heal from his injuries. But, with Guerrero, it just unfortunately never happened because he would pass away at such a young age. I mean, he died at the age of 38 years old, which is so young to die. I mean, what happened was that Eddie Guerrero and Chavo Guerrero were at the hotel. Eddie, Chavo, and Chris they were travel partners. They would always go at around to multiple different places as like a travel team, They would always go to hotels to travel because they were close with each other. Chris would go off on his own to his own hotel room. Everyone would go off. The next day, Chavo gets a phone call from a hotel room explaining that from the hotel room that Eddie didn't answer his wake-up call. And when both were going to the show, to the hotel room to check on him, Chavo would go there with the hotel trying to knock on the door, see what's going on with Eddie. And they actually had to cut the latch on the hotel room door. And they'd find Eddie Guerrero on the floor with a toothbrush in his hand, and like the water was running. And the crazy part and the saddest part that I've ever seen was when Chavo was explaining this, and when they found Eddie Guerrero, he was still alive, and Eddie was gurgling when they found him, and while they were calling the cops, and Eddie Guerrero passed in Chavo's arms. Like, he went from warm to cold, and I I I can't imagine you finding your family member in the hotel room and feeling them go from warm to cold. Like that, it's devastating. It really, really is devastating that he would do such a thing. And what's also sad too was when Chavo had to go tell Chris, because both were friends. I mean, Eddie Guerrero would give a Bible to Chris Benoit, and Chris, when Chavo told Chris, he was just devastated. And the one thing everyone would always say is that Chris was never the same the moment Eddie Guerrero passed away, because they were close, and Chris would always confide in Eddie Guerrero. And the moment he died, Chris was just never the same. And with Eddie dying, they would, of course, do the Eddie Guerrero tribute show. And it was just so upsetting. And when he was pronounced dead at the age of 38. And what's crazy, too, about the Eddie Guerrero tribute show was that Mercedes Moné, Sasha Banks, was in attendance at that show. And she thought that The Undertaker was going to face Eddie Guerrero. And she basically found out in that building that Eddie Guerrero had passed. And, oh, man, it's just a sad, sad thing. And, Eddie Guerrero is one of the greatest of all time. And fascinating facts about Eddie Guerrero's funeral. Did you know that superstar Billy Graham was involved with the funeral? That's right. He was actually officiating Eddie Guerrero's funeral service, because at the time, superstar Billy Graham went back to the Lord. He found God and was rebuilding himself. I mean, he also had a lot of health issues at the time as well, but he would go back to his love of religion, and he actually officiated funerals. And Eddie Guerrero was one of the funerals that Superstar would finish. And there's also a story too as well that Superstar Billy Graham and Chris Jericho had heat with each other and would have an altercation at Eddie's funeral. But I find that crazy that Superstar Billy Graham was involved with the funeral. He was officiating it, and it's crazy, And his Eddie Guerrero's influence is still being felt to this very day. I mean, look at Dominic Mysterio. He's basically he uses a lot of what Eddie Guerrero brought to the table, and I love how one of the reasons why I like Dominic Mysterio was not only his heel turn, but how in his feud with Rey Mysterio, he's like, Eddie Guerrero's my father, this, like basically using Eddie Guerrero to go after Rey Mysterio. And there's so many professional wrestlers that he influenced in the business, and his comedy, what he did in the ring is legendary. No one will ever forget Eddie Guerrero. And I often wonder to myself as well with Eddie Guerrero, what if he never passed away? To me, the match I wanted to see so badly, and it just sucks we never got a chance to see Eddie Guerrero versus Shawn Michaels would have been such a great match. I mean, Shawn Michaels is amazing as well, but imagine Shawn Michaels in the ring with Eddie Guerrero. That would have been so great. And it also sucks too that Eddie Guerrero and Stone Cold never had that feud together, because the original plan was that Stone Cold was going to feud with Eddie Guerrero, but it didn't last because in 2002, Stone Cold would actually leave the company, and those plans got thrown out the window. And I often wonder if Eddie and Stone Cold actually had a match, that would have been so fun. And I often wonder to myself as well, if Eddie Guerrero was still alive during the Benoit stuff, would it have been prevented, or would it have delayed the inevitable? We're never going to know the answer to that question, but to me, I think that if Eddie was still alive at that time, it just would have only delayed the inevitable because Chris was a wreck at that point. Not only with the mental health issues he had, the steroid abuse, domestic violence stuff that was going on with Nancy that predated Guerrero's death. I mean, he had issues with Nancy in 2000. Uh, we're never going to know the answer to that question. I mean, but maybe if Eddie was still alive, he would have done something and that incident would have never happened. But, just sucks, And I will always appreciate Eddie Guerrero, what he did for the business, what he did for his art for the wrestling business. And his death actually started WWE to do a drug policy to help their athletes. I mean, there was a lot of loopholes in that drug test, and it wasn't super certain until the Benoit stuff happened. But with Eddie dying, with all of his drug issues, they started this drug policy. And the thing with Eddie's death, he didn't die due to a relapse. He actually died due to heart disease, but that heart disease was brought on by his drug abuse. And it really, really sucks that, he did way too much damage to his body. Way too much damage. And, he did get himself sober. And, it's just devastating that Eddie, had the heart failure. And he also had the painkiller addiction as well. But again, with all the steroids he took, it was just too much abuse for his body. And, he paid a price. And I just wish he was alive today. I really wish he would. Because imagine Eddie Guerrero, what he would be doing, whether it's comedy, maybe he would be a trainer or a producer at WWE. He would have been great in that role. And it really sucks that Eddie left at the young age. Man, Viva La Raza, man. Rest in peace, Eddie. Thank you for everything you did for the business. And we're never going to forget you, man. And I know that whatever you're doing up there, you're lying, you're cheating, you're stealing, Rest in peace. This concludes episode 6 of the Wrestling with Wisdom show. I hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to hit the like button down below. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the bell for all notifications. I'm always going to be here on Thursdays recording these videos. I hope you enjoyed and hope you have a good day, everyone. Bye-bye.